This is Hannibal, back here from thehannibaltv.com with my final top up to go live today with a review of the Adrian Adonis Dark Side of the Ring, which, by the way, according to one of his daughters, who I interviewed in a link that's in the description, her interview with me was one of the reasons they're doing this. And actually, the Dark Side of the Ring producers told me that they got a lot of ideas from my channel and found some characters such as Ken Patira for the Tales of the Territories show that they came up with based on seeing how funny they were on my channel. So I liked this one. I mean, I'm no expert on Adrian Adonis. He was a little bit before my time. I started watching wrestling at WrestleMania 5, which he would have been passed away by then. I do remember seeing the LGN packages with Adrian Adonis as a kid, with him with the pink shorts and his arms out like that. It stood out to me. And I remember, like, one of the first times I saw him was a videotape of WrestleMania 3. And as a small child, me and my friends watching it, we remembered, like, him for the boobs he had. It was like a man with boobs. But honestly, I like him. The more I've heard about him and talked to his daughters, and honestly, I've interviewed Danny Spivey. I think I might be the first one that ever went into great detail with Danny Spivey about the fight with Adrian Adonis, which apparently they buried the hatchet on, which Danny said in this Dark Side of the Ring. I'll just briefly go through this. He grew up in Buffalo, New York, a town I'm pretty familiar with, been to many times. Was actually going to go to college at the University of Buffalo. I had a scholarship there. But I turned it down to go into pro wrestling. Lex Luger is also from there. I think his mother's passed away now, but when I interviewed Lex Luger, he was living with his mother in Buffalo, New York. I did the interview at his house. He grew up in a rough section with a lot of Italians. They hinted that he did collections work, and that he was a tough guy. I mean, when I interviewed his daughter, it appeared like he ran with some connected people. Bret Hart, who was friends with him, brings up that he seemed like a connected guy. They talk about how in the Amarillo territory, he would take on fans for real in fights before wrestling shows. Can you imagine that nowadays? I mean, that's how much the business was protected back then. Of course, he went on. I remember him. Obviously, I'm a big Jesse Ventura fan from tapes of the East-West connection of him and Jesse Ventura. There's a recent video I reviewed of Hulk Hogan alleging that Jesse and Adrian both liked to do their cocaine when they were together. Bret Hart also talks about doing it with Adrian Adonis and Piper and Jim Neidhart and Iron Sheik after shows till 4 in the morning at WWE shows. Bret talks about that it starts off as a fun drug, but it can destroy people, and it wasn't the cause of Adrian Adonis' death, but it seemed to be the cause of a lot of his downfall. Some of the partying ways. He may have made a comeback if it hadn't been for the car accident. But Bret Hart luckily got out of that partying scene. It seemed like in the 80s, you had to be a partier to be a wrestler. You just wouldn't have been allowed or accepted into the business. Where now those type of people wouldn't even be considered for wrestling because they really want corporate people. It made for better characters back then. A lot of them died young. A lot of them had real problems in their lives. But now those people don't have jobs, and it's the corporate people that have jobs. But it's a different business, it's a different industry. I'm not saying one was better than the other, but the one definitely made for better characters. They talked about when they made him into the gay character almost as a bad thing. going back and looking at those tapes and looking at that footage, that was a great character for him and very entertaining, hilarious, got great heat at the time. They showed the clip of Tuesday Nights Titans where he basically announces he was gay, and like those were the days where you would, that was not very accepted. So for him to be like the type of character willing to embrace that and not care about heat and just jump into the character and get it over, you got to respect that. He seemed to be a good family man. They didn't talk about him having problems cheating. They talked about him talking to his wife multiple times on the phone back in the days before the internet, having to do collect calls, being good with his kids, which in my interview with his eldest daughter, she clearly loved him a lot. He did seem like a great family man. Could he be a bully in the ring? Probably. I believe that. A lot of people were back then because they had to go through it themselves. And I'm sure as he got into his issues, maybe he got a little bit more vicious. And maybe when he picked on Danny Spivey and roughed him up a little bit, he picked on the wrong guy. And it kind of reminds me with him and the Spivey incident, similar to the Vader incident with Paul Orndorff, is it kind of, when Vader lost that backstage fight to Paul Orndorff, it kind of not only killed his reputation behind the scenes, but killed his on-camera push. He had a brief run in WWE on top with Michaels, but it was nothing compared to how over Vader was in WCW. And Adonis, it looked like they were going to pair him with Hulk Hogan. And I could have seen that being a great angle, but he ended up feuding with Piper, who was a close friend with him, and then being released. Where he had ballooned up to a huge weight after that. Greg Gagne talks about Adonis being like 450 pounds when he then went to the AWA. Apparently he then went to Japan, lost a lot of weight, was on his way to making a comeback, which he still could have made. He was only in his mid-30s. But unfortunately, after a Japanese tour, he went to Newfoundland, of all places, a tour with the Bear Man, who was known for having a bear that killed his ex-fiancée in the days where you had wrestling bears. Which, by the way, I would still wrestle a bear. Let me say that for the record. I would wrestle a bear. That would be on my bucket list. But yeah, he passed away. Sabu talked to me about the incident. There could have been drinking and driving involved. Who knows? Most wrestlers drank and drove back then. It was a tragedy. He passed away along with 3 of the 4 members in the vehicle. And I already showed this, and I wanted to interview Ricky Johnson, who appeared in this, who was on the tour with Adrian Adonis. And Ricky Johnson, I did a single video about this, is The Rock's uncle, Rocky Johnson's brother, who never had the success of Rocky Johnson, but was popular in the Toronto territory and did the Bearman circuit and all that. And I was going to interview him, but he backed out of the interview several times and made some bizarre passes at me, which at first I thought was a joke, and now I am not so sure, but whatever. He's scratched off the list. We won't get the insight on that. Bret Hart mentions in this that he could have seen himself feuding with Adrian Adonis when he was champion, and Bret Hart had pulled back then. He could have got Dynamite Kid rehired at one point, but Dynamite Kid didn't want to go back. So you can think about the what ifs. Adrian Adonis was a great athlete, phenomenal character. I do love Dangerous Danny Spivey, though. Dangerous Dan, Big Money Dan, the left-hand man, who got that reputation, apparently, according to The Undertaker, from being a pimp in Tampa and from basically ending Adonis's WWE run. But a lot of people say that Danny Spivey, and you can see this in this video with the yellow tights and the blonde hair, similar physique to Hogan. You could argue who had the better physique. Danny was leaner, more natural. I think maybe a bit taller. Hogan was more bulked up. But it's been known throughout the years that Hogan has got people fired that look like him. So that could also be one of the reasons, not just the backstage fight with Adonis, but of course, if they're building Adonis and you beat up a guy that they have plans to feud with Hulk Hogan with, that's also going to happen. But I'm a huge Dan Spivey fan, so shout out to him. Spivey was a bad dude. Yes, partying was fine back then. Apparently, yeah, now you're fired. You're fired. Like the Pipers and the Flairs would not last today. They wouldn't even be considered. Spivey was too tall to job to Adrian Adonis. I mean, I think Adrian, for whatever reason, he had a mean streak in him. Spivey was younger, getting his WWE run. There may have been some jealousy there. Who the hell knows? I like both of them. I'm glad to hear that they made up. But I've heard that Mario Mancino also said that Adonis was rough with him. I've also heard stories that towards the end of Adrian's WWE run that he didn't like to bathe all the time. He kind of found it funny. So for various reasons, some people didn't like to work with him. Greg Gagne said that Adonis tried to eat the whole dessert taping, the AWA taping. I don't know about Greg Gagne. He tells a lot of fibs. And would Sheepburn Gagne have had catering in the 80s? Who knows? It's possible. Wrestle a bear. I'd love to wrestle a bear, man. I don't care. Wrestle a bear. That'd be fun. That would be fun. What a way to go out. Yes, Rocky Johnson had a lesser known brother, Ricky. Maybe he's lesser known because of whatever demons he might have. Who knows? Most real wrestlers blade themselves. Well, have you seen my forehead? It's not exactly a virgin forehead, guys. And I have actually had plastic surgery on this forehead. I'm not really shy about violence. Blading myself. Not at all. Had to be related to him. The other guy was Dave Sullivan that got released from WCW over the looking like Hogan too much, apparently. Spivey, so I mean that could have had to do with it, but I'm not going to go into that too much. Yeah, God bless you, Ricky Johnson, for giving us all a good laugh. I have to say you're funny. I have to say you're a hilarious guy. Shout out to you and shout out to The Rock. I'm a huge Rock fan. That would be the guy I'd want to wrestle most, which will never ever happen. Hernandez interview coming up with Jack Kilby in 5 minutes. Have a great night. Comment your thoughts on the Adrian Adonis episode below and check out my interview with his daughter in the link in the description.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Follow us on Twitter at the Hannibal TV.